He crashed onto the pavement, gasping for air as the crowd laughed and filmed his humiliation. But that wasn't the worst part. The guard stepped forward, raising his rifle, and the cold steel of the bayonet stopped just inches from his chest. And then came the sound of heavy footsteps. But what happened next would become his true nightmare. Let's start from the very beginning. This channel won't survive without your subscription and likes. Help me! The night in London was cool, but the streets were still buzzing with life. Tourists crowded near Buckingham Palace, snapping photos and marveling at the monumental architecture. The stone walls and gilded gates gleamed under the streetlights, while the motionless guards stood at their posts like living monuments of tradition. From a nearby pub, a man stumbled out. Bob, the textbook American redneck in his 50s. His face was flushed red from alcohol. A worn-out baseball cap sat crookedly on his head, proudly displaying the words "Proud American," and his denim shirt looked like it had survived more than a couple of bar fights. His dirty sneakers barely kept him standing. Bob let out a loud belch, lazily glanced around, and squinted. And that's when he saw the guard. Tall, imposing, dressed in a perfectly pressed red uniform and the iconic bearskin hat, the soldier stood by the palace gates, seemingly oblivious to everything around him. His rigid posture and frozen gaze made him look as if he had been carved from stone. Bob smirked. "Well, there you are, buddy," he muttered, staggering toward the soldier. A stupid thought took root in his drunken mind. The closer he got, the more it grew, like a weed in an abandoned yard. "All right, let's see here." He stopped right in front of the guard, staring him down with amusement. Then, with a sloppy motion, he lifted a finger and poked the soldier straight in the chest. "Hey, man, where's the bathroom? I really got to take a leak." The guard didn't move. Bob blinked, glancing around as if checking whether he had somehow missed a response. Then he leaned in closer, his alcohol-heavy breath hitting the motionless soldier's face. "You deaf or something? I'm talking to you, buddy." He poked him again, harder this time. Still nothing. By now, passers-by had begun to stop. A few had their phones out, anticipating something viral-worthy. Tourists whispered amongst themselves, watching the scene unfold. But Bob didn't care. He nodded slowly, as if coming to a conclusion, then turned to the crowd and loudly declared, "All right then, if he won't tell me, I'll just solve this problem myself." And with that, he reached for his zipper. Gasps erupted from the onlookers. A woman with a child quickly shielded her son's eyes. Someone in the crowd laughed nervously, while another muttered, "Oh God, is he serious?" But Bob was dead serious. He swayed on his feet but kept going, and that was his fatal mistake. The crowd froze. The moment Bob reached for his belt, time seemed to slow. The air was thick with a mix of confusion, tension, and growing horror. A woman with 2 children panicked, turning their heads away and hissing, Don't look at that crazy man." Other tourists weren't so squeamish. Phones shot into the air, cameras flashing, capturing every second of the unfolding madness. "Hey, somebody stop this idiot!" shouted a young guy wearing a London Rocks t-shirt. But Bob didn't care. Drunk and proud of himself, he grinned, threw his head back and let out a deep, raspy laugh, the kind that reeked of cheap ale. His face was even redder now. He stumbled back slightly, nearly losing his balance but managing to stay upright. "What's with the faces? In America, we can do whatever the hell we want. Freedom, baby." His words were slurred, barely making sense, but his meaning was clear. People exchanged glances. Some rolled their eyes. Some smirked. Even among the spectators, there were those who treated this as nothing more than a ridiculous spectacle. A chuckling tourist mumbled, "This is definitely making the top 10 dumbest things tourists have done in London." But no one expected what happened next. Bob sneered and had just begun pulling his belt loose when, boom! A thunderous sound shattered the air. With military precision, the guard took a sharp step forward, swiftly grabbing his rifle. With a single, powerful strike, he drove the butt of the gun into Bob's chest, sending him flying. Bob's body crashed onto the pavement with a heavy thud. The crowd gasped. For a second, there was absolute silence. Then, chaos erupted. Shouts, laughter, cheers. Phones, now focused entirely on Bob, sprawled on the ground in front of the palace gates. His eyes were wide open, trying to process what had just happened. You hit me?" His voice came out weak, laced with shock. He blinked, as if struggling to believe it. "You can't do that. I'm an American. I have human rights." Somewhere in the crowd, someone scoffed. "Yeah, buddy, tell that to the British Royal Guard." The soldier, expressionless, returned to his post. No reaction, no words, just cold, unshakable discipline. And that pissed Bob off even more. Wheezing, he rolled onto his side, coughed, and struggled to catch his breath. Then, slowly but determinedly, he started pushing himself up. The crowd murmured, waiting to see what he would do next. But no one knew that this drunken redneck was about to cross a line he could never come back from. The crowd held its breath. Every eye was fixed on the tourist sprawled out on the pavement in front of Buckingham Palace. Bob coughed, spitting to the side, and slowly pushed himself up onto his elbows. His face was burning, partly from rage, partly from sheer humiliation. He struggled to his feet, wobbling, and looked around. The people weren't just watching with curiosity anymore. There was pure contempt in their eyes. Some laughed. Others filmed him, eager to see what would happen next. And that's when Bob snapped. "You son of a bitch in uniform! You think you can humiliate me?" His bloodshot eyes darted around until they landed on a plastic cup lying on the pavement, still holding a few drops of beer. Without hesitation, he grabbed it and hurled it at the guard. Splat! The plastic cup hit the red uniform with a dull smack, warm beer trickling down the fabric. The guard didn't flinch. The crowd froze. Someone covered their mouth in horror. Others whispered excitedly, "Oh no, he actually did it. That's it now." Bob sneered. "Come on, dumbass. Show some emotion, or are you even human?" And that's when everything changed. The guard stepped forward. But this wasn't just a step. It was a movement of sheer force, executed with the precision of a war machine. Bob didn't even have time to react. The soldier gripped his rifle with both hands, lifted it, and aimed the long, polished bayonet directly at Bob's chest. "Step back. Immediately." His voice was steady, devoid of emotion. But that steadiness carried an underlying threat, like a mechanical order of execution. Bob's smirk froze. The crowd gasped. Someone gulped audibly. The bayonet was just inches from his chest. I was just joking, man." The guard didn't respond, didn't blink, didn't move an inch. And then, the sound of heavy footsteps behind him. 2 royal security officers emerged from the crowd, their black suits flashing in the lamplight. Before Bob could react, strong hands grabbed his arms and yanked him down. His face smashed against the cold pavement. The crowd erupted. "Oh yes, that's what he deserves. That idiot thought he could get away with it. London ain't America, mate." One of the officers, a tall man with a sharp, predatory look, slowly leaned down and coldly muttered, "You are under arrest for disorderly conduct and insulting the Royal Guard." Cold steel cuffs, a face pressed against the pavement, and the realization. Bob wasn't laughing anymore. Hours passed. Gray, lifeless walls, metal bars, a dim, flickering ceiling light that made his headache even worse. The air was thick with the smell of stale sweat and cheap disinfectant. Bob sat on a hard bench, rocking back and forth, his head pounding from the hangover, his stomach twisted into knots. His fingers trembled as he rubbed his face, his usual cocky grin nowhere to be found. He blinked, trying to piece together what the hell had happened. The last thing he remembered was being tackled to the ground, the crowd laughing, someone shouting, "Let's see him cry now!" Bob swallowed hard, doubling over. "It's fine. They'll just hold me here for a few hours, right?" But his nightmare was just beginning. The loud clang of locks sliding open made him flinch. The heavy door creaked as a tall officer stepped inside. His sharp features were unreadable, his uniform perfectly pressed, his boots shining. But there was a glint in his eye, something predatory. He strolled in slowly, savoring the moment, then clasped his hands behind his back and looked down at Bob. "Well, Mr. Freedom Baby, how's your London vacation going?" Bob lifted his bloodshot eyes, looking pathetic. "Hey, man, this is just a misunderstanding. I didn't mean any harm. I just had a few too many, that's all. Let's work something out, huh? I'll pay a fine, whatever it takes." The officer arched an eyebrow, shaking his head. "A fine?" His voice carried the faintest hint of amusement. "No, buddy. This isn't some bar fight where you can buy your way out. Congratulations." He leaned in slightly, savoring the moment. "You're being deported and blacklisted. You'll never set foot in Britain again." Bob went pale. "What?" He sat up straight, eyes wide, his breath quickening. "You can't do that. It was just a joke. I'm a tourist. I have human rights." The officer smirked, stepping back. "Sure, feel free to appeal it in court." "Oh, wait. You're banned from entering the country. Shame." Bob's mouth opened, then closed. His lips quivered. "No, no, 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 you can't. Hey, I'm an American. We have the Constitution. You can't just throw me out." The officer chuckled, then pointed toward the far corner of the cell. "And if you need the bathroom, there's a bucket over there." With that, he slammed the bars shut. Clank. Silence. Bob sat there, motionless. His gaze drifted toward the rusted bucket in the corner, but he wasn't really looking at it. His mind was spinning. His foolish, drunken stunt had just turned into the most humiliating moment of his life. Banned. Deported. A complete disgrace. Bob buried his face in his hands and let out a muffled groan. This day, he would never forget.